Around the world, countries are already on the brink of confrontation over rivers that are drying up faster than anyone predicted, and we are dangerously unprepared for what's coming. The major global conflicts of the near future won't be over ideology or territory in the traditional sense, but something far more essential: water. In fact, these wars have already started. This isn't some dystopian forecast. It's happening right now, in the river basins that give life to billions. From the fertile banks of the Nile to the snow-fed streams of the Himalayas, controlling water has become a matter of national survival. A warming planet, exploding populations, and decaying infrastructure have created a perfect storm. The result? A new map of global turmoil, where dams are the new fortresses, riverbeds are the new front lines, and the struggle for every last drop is pushing nations to a dangerous precipice. Stay with me. Today, we are revealing the front lines of these new wars, the hidden casualties of a crisis ignored for too long, and why the institutions built to keep the peace are failing to stop the tide. Welcome to Empire Secrets. For most of history, we've treated water as an infinite resource, a gift from the heavens. But that's a dangerous illusion. Today, water is finite, it's contested, and it's increasingly being used as a weapon. About 60% of the world's fresh water flows across national borders. More than 260 international river basins support 40% of the world's population, providing everything from drinking water to power. For decades, geopolitics has run on a simple equation: energy equals power. Nations with oil and gas controlled the global economy. But that era is ending. The new equation is much simpler and far more brutal. Water equals life. As climate change throws rainfall patterns into chaos and melts ancient glaciers, the reliable flow of these great rivers is no longer a given. Some regions will get catastrophic floods, while others will face relentless, multi-decade droughts. This volatility turns rivers from shared lifelines into sources of strategic competition. An upstream nation can build a dam and effectively hold its downstream neighbors hostage. A downstream nation facing an existential thirst might see no other option than to secure its water by force. This dynamic is now playing across the globe, creating a volatile new geopolitics of water. These aren't just isolated disputes. They're interconnected symptoms of a planet pushed to its limit. The frontiers are no longer just lines on a map. They are the rivers themselves, and the first shots are already being fired. Nowhere is this new water war more obvious than along the world's longest river, the Nile. For millennia, Egypt has been the gift of the Nile. That remains true today. Over 98% of Egypt's 110 million people live packed along its banks, and the river supplies almost all of the country's fresh water. For Cairo, controlling the Nile isn't policy, it's survival. But 4,000 kilometers upstream, another nation has laid claim to the river's power. Ethiopia, the source of over 85% of the Nile's water, has spent the last decade building the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam, or GERD. For Addis Ababa, the GERD is a symbol of national rebirth. It's the largest hydroelectric plant in Africa, designed to double the country's power output and pull millions from poverty. For a nation with one of the lowest electricity access rates on the continent, the dam is a ticket to the modern world. The problem is, one nation's dream is another's nightmare. Egypt fears the GERD gives Ethiopia a faucet to control its lifeline. The main argument is over how fast the country at the river's source fills the dam's massive reservoir and the rules for releasing water, especially during a drought. A rapid fill could slash the Nile's flow, devastating Egyptian agriculture and creating a humanitarian catastrophe. Egypt has called the dam an existential threat and has reportedly said it reserves the right to protect its water's interests. For over a decade, negotiations between Egypt, Ethiopia, and their neighbor Sudan have gone nowhere. Talks mediated by the African Union and the United States have collapsed time and again. In mid-2025, Egypt's foreign minister declared that 12 years of diplomacy had officially failed, accusing Ethiopia of using the talks to impose its own will on the river. Addis Ababa fires back, arguing it has sovereign rights to its own resources and rejecting what it sees as outdated colonial-era treaties from 1929 and 1959 that gave Egypt veto power over upstream projects and ignored Ethiopia entirely. This standoff signals a fundamental power shift. For the first time, an upstream nation holds real leverage over the Nile's historic ruler. Egypt, with its powerful military, has long dominated the region. But by completing and operating the dam, Ethiopia has changed the facts on the ground. The debate is no longer about technical flow rates. It's about raw national pride and security. While both sides have avoided a direct military fight, the rhetoric is dangerously hot. The Nile is no longer just a river, it's a 4,000-kilometer-long Cold War, where one miscalculation could ignite a conflict affecting hundreds of millions of people. If the Nile is a cold war over water, the Indus River basin is a ticking time bomb. This system, fed by melting Himalayan glaciers, is the lifeline for over 300 million people in Pakistan, India, Afghanistan, and China. But it's the relationship between two of those countries, nuclear-armed rivals India and Pakistan, that makes this river one of the most dangerous places on Earth. For more than 60 years, an incredible feat of diplomacy kept the peace: the Indus Waters Treaty of 1960, brokered by the World Bank. The treaty survived 3 full-scale wars and countless skirmishes. It neatly divides the river system, giving India control of the 3 eastern rivers and Pakistan control of the 3 larger western rivers. For decades, it's been praised as one of the world's most successful water-sharing deals. But the unthinkable is now on the table. Following a terrorist attack in Pahalgam in 2025, which India blamed on a Pakistan-based group, New Delhi took the extraordinary step of suspending the treaty, citing national security. India announced it would halt the flow of water from the western rivers it controls into Pakistan. The Pakistani Prime Minister's office immediately condemned the move as an act of war, with some officials warning that any disruption to its water supply would be met with force, even hinting at the use of nuclear weapons. This escalation didn't come out of nowhere. Tensions have been building for years. India has grown frustrated with the treaty's rules, arguing it needs more water for its own people and for new hydropower projects Pakistan sees as a threat. For its part, Pakistan has accused India of using its upstream position to violate the spirit of agreement. But the real driver of this crisis is something neither side can control: climate change. The Himalayan glaciers feeding the Indus are melting at an alarming rate. In the short term, this means more catastrophic floods, but in the long term, as the glaciers vanish, the mighty Indus will begin to dry up. The treaty, designed before anyone understood climate change, is simply not equipped to handle this future. India's suspension of the treaty has broken a 6-decade taboo. It has weaponized water in one of the world's most volatile conflicts. In a region with 2 nuclear powers and a rapidly dwindling water supply, the collapse of one institution that guaranteed a fragile peace is a recipe for disaster. The Indus Basin is no longer just a shared resource, it's a loaded gun. The water crisis isn't just in Africa and South Asia. In the Middle East, the very cradle of civilization is running out of water, fueling both international tension and internal collapse. The Tigris and Euphrates rivers, which once nourished ancient Mesopotamia, are now at the center of a 3-way struggle between Turkey, Syria, and Iraq. Much like Ethiopia on the Nile, Turkey holds the upstream advantage. Its massive network of 22 dams has given Ankara immense control over the flow of both rivers. For downstream Iraq and Syria, the results have been devastating. Iraq is facing its lowest water reserves in modern history, a crisis made worse by war, mismanagement, and reduced river flows. In late 2025, after years of failed talks, signed a Memorandum of Understanding to cooperate on water management, a step aimed at addressing a dispute of nearly 75 years. But before this, the rivers that made this land fertile were shrinking, leaving behind salty soil and crippling agriculture. Meanwhile, a different ancient river is sparking conflict on another border. The Helmand River flows from Afghanistan into Iran's arid Sistan-Balochistan province. A 1973 treaty is supposed to guarantee Iran a certain amount of water each year, but Iran accuses the Taliban-led government in Afghanistan of cutting off the flow, releasing only a fraction of what was agreed. Afghanistan, facing its own severe droughts, denies this and continues building dams that further reduce the water reaching Iran. This dispute is no longer just diplomatic. In 2023, deadly border clashes erupted between Iranian and Taliban forces over water. As Iran's Hamoun wetlands turned to dust, Tehran has stepped up the forced repatriation of Afghan migrants, adding a layer of human suffering to the conflict. From the Tigris to the Helmand, the story is the same. Upstream development and climate change are creating zero-sum conflicts where one country's gain is another's loss. These river basins lack strong, modern treaties. The agreements that do exist are either ignored or just not built for an era of rapid environmental change. The result is a mess of simmering conflicts, violent skirmishes, and humanitarian disasters that threaten to destabilize an already volatile region. The cradle of civilization is becoming a cradle of conflict, parched by thirst and political failure. These conflicts aren't isolated events. They're the leading edge of a global systemic failure. The world is dangerously unprepared for the era of water wars, and there are three big reasons why: failing laws, accelerating pressures, and a catastrophic breakdown of governance. First, the international laws for managing shared water are cracking under the strain. There are over 300 international water treaties, but many are old, inflexible, and designed for a stable climate. They often allocate fixed amounts of water, which is unworkable during severe droughts. The Indus Waters Treaty is a perfect example. Successful for decades, but without the tools to adapt to melting glaciers. In other basins, like the Tigris-Euphrates, binding agreements barely exist, creating a power vacuum. Second, the twin pressures of population growth and climate change are pushing the crisis beyond our control. The global population is projected to hit 9.7 billion by 2050, mostly in water-stressed regions. At the same time, climate change is making water supply dangerously unpredictable. The UN predicts that by 2030, water scarcity could displace up to 700 million people, creating refugee crisis on a scale we've never seen before. Finally, and maybe most critically, this scarcity is exposing a total failure of governance. This is where the water wars get violent. The Pacific Institute, which tracks water-related violence, has documented a disturbing surge. In 2023 alone, there were 347 instances of water-related armed conflict, a dramatic increase from previous years. These aren't just diplomatic spats. They include attacks on water infrastructure and the deliberate use of water as a weapon of war. Yemen is the ultimate case study. It's one of the most water-scarce countries on Earth, and its civil war has obliterated any attempt at water management. More than 45% of its water infrastructure has been damaged or destroyed. Warring parties have weaponized water, with Houthi forces blocking supplies to cities and government-affiliated militias selling public water for profit. This collapse has led to a free-for-all of unregulated well drilling, draining aquifers at an astonishing rate. In Yemen, the war isn't just causing a water crisis. The water crisis is now fueling local conflicts over the last remaining resources. This is the grim reality. Our institutions are failing, environmental pressures are getting worse, and in the vacuum, violence is taking root. The headlines about water wars usually focus on geopolitics, dams, treaties, and military threats, but the real story is a silent humanitarian catastrophe affecting billions. While nations posture, their people are already dying of thirst. The statistics are shameful. According to a 2025 WHO and UNICEF report, over 2 billion people, 1 in 4 people on the planet, lack access to safely managed drinking water. 4 billion people, nearly half of the world's population, face severe water scarcity for at least 1 month every year. This crisis falls hardest on women and girls. Every single day, they collectively spend an estimated 200 million hours walking to collect water. Those are hours not spent in school, not earning an income, not with family. It's a theft of potential on a global scale. The daily trek for water is the end of their education and the start of their life of hardship. The crisis is also about food and stability. Agriculture uses the vast majority of our fresh water, and when water runs out, harvests fail. Food prices spike, malnutrition spreads, and farmers abandon their land, triggering mass migration to overburdened cities. In a country like Yemen, the collapse of agriculture from water scarcity was a key driver of its descent into chaos. This is the true face of the water wars. It's not always soldiers on a battlefield. It's a mother choosing which child gets a drink. It's a farmer watching his ancestral lands turn to dust. It's a young girl dropping out of school to spend her days walking for water. These are the unseen casualties, the millions of lives being quietly wrecked by a crisis the world has chosen to ignore. And as the planet gets hotter and drier, their numbers are set to explode. The picture is clear, and it's deeply unsettling. The water wars aren't a distant dystopian fantasy. They are here, now, and they are escalating. They're being fought in the war rooms of Cairo and New Delhi, but also in the villages of Yemen and the farmlands of Iraq. And they're fought with dams and diplomacy. What we've looked at today aren't isolated incidents, they're connected fronts in a new kind of global conflict. Climate change is the accelerant, population growth is the driver, and failed governance is the spark that lights the fuse. We're entering an era where controlling a river will be as strategic as controlling an oil field was in the 20th century. The future will be defined by hydropolitics, and it promises to be one of mass migration, food crises, and failing states. The world is just not ready. Our laws are outdated, our infrastructure is crumbling, and our political will is missing in action. We've treated water like it's infinite for far too long, and now the bill is coming due. While cooperation is still possible, that window is closing fast. The trends all point in one direction: more scarcity, more competition, and more conflict. The question is no longer if water wars will define the 21st century, but where the next major flashpoint will be. We've looked at the Nile, the Indus, and the Tigris-Euphrates, but so many other river basins are hanging in the balance. The Mekong in Southeast Asia, the Jordan in the Levant, the Colorado in North America. Each is a potential front line. So, I leave you with this question: which river basin do you think will be the flashpoint for the first major declared water war? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. This is Empire Secrets. Subscribe for more investigations into the systems shaping our world. Your desire, your empire.